welcome everybody to our live webinar at PLB. Thank you for joining us, and we're very pleased and honored to have you join us on our monthly webinar. This time, this is our what webinar?
Number 17.
Number 17. Okay, we still have 4 to go because we aim for 21 webinars this year. And of course, we just completed our 2 rounds of live debate just about a couple of weeks back. So thank you for joining us on our live debate. We had 2 rounds. One was between HDB resale versus BTO. The other one was condo versus landed. And of course, today I have Ong Yu Rong with me as well as George. And we're going to do like a 3-man team live webinar with you. And this time round, we will fully focus on 9 very interesting case studies. And these are all actual real case studies that we want to share with our audience today. And we call it the Property Portfolio Expansion Strategies for 2024. So first up, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, maybe a quick introduction video to share with us what we do here at PropertyLimBrothers. Let's roll the clip.
Got a lot of shine. Running up the number, that's a lot of crime. Try to take it from me, must be out your mind. Lot of slime. Smoky in the air, that's a lot of pine. Pockets running over with the dollar sign. Try to take it from me. Yeah. Big time. Big time. Big time.
So we hope that you enjoy this very short introductory clip to understand what we do at PLB. Of course, in PropertyLimBrothers, we are very passionate about real estate. And of course, one of our key goals is to provide very valuable webinars for our audiences every single month. Now, if this is your first time joining us, our webinars are crafted with a mind for research and education. And there will be no product push or product pitch at the end of the webinar. So in the event, if we do partner with any developers for any specific projects, we will list it in the main title before you even join our webinar. So for today's context, we're going to talk about 9 case studies. I'm going to share 3 case studies, followed by George and Ong Yu Rong will each share 3 together. And this is our PLB team model, in the sense that we are so-called having 2 separate teams. I mean, one is a PLB Realty. We have about 60 over realtors with us, and of course we have our PLB media team as well, about 65 creatives, and we do everything in-house right here. So if you have not seen our channel, of course our channels right now, we have 3 different channels: PLB Insights, talking about new launches; NOTG, talking about research and different kinds of interviews, as well as our main channel at PropertyLimBrothers. Quick introduction, myself, I've been in the real estate industry for 16 years, and with me will be George. He's our senior listing manager at PLB Realty, as well as Ong Yu Rong, our senior investment consultant. So quick disclaimer, property investment is an important decision in your life, and of course, if you want to make any specific decisions, do ensure that you have checked through your financial liabilities as well as financial calculations in order to make an informed decision. And today's context is mainly for educational purposes. So these are the 9 case studies that we're prepped for you. And the first one will be to navigate HDB to condo upgrading strategy. And I'm going to share two key methods with you right here. Second one, which George is going to come up and share, you will be talking about one of the clients' family strategy to scale from 630,000 portfolio in terms of its valuation for the first HDB all the way to a $2.6 million dual property portfolio. Third one will be how a family moved from one HDB to build a $2.8 million portfolio today. And then, of course, the fourth one, pretty interesting, is the power of reinvestment, leveraging the first property profit all the way towards the down payment for the second as well as the third property. Now, fifth one, pretty interesting as well. Josh is going to come up to share about how a family transformed $1.9 million inheritance cash into a dual real estate portfolio. And follow on with this condo catalyst, how this particular investor actually opt over a HDB choice, and of course with Yu Rong's advice, paved the way towards a 3.2 million landed property in today's context. Seventh will be a $2.4 million property portfolio, as well as number 8 on how a family accelerated from $1.48 million to $3.4 million property for retirement. Last but not least, the last story is about this expansion from $1.6 million all the way to $6.1 million in terms of total property portfolio today. So I'm going to kickstart the first case study. And I want to start from the fundamental base perspective first. Because after this first case study, which a lot of families are actually in a dilemma today, and if this is where you are right now, I hope that this first set of case study will be able to help you to see what a lot of property investors as well as families are doing towards their planning of their portfolio. So this very first step will be a very generic case study. This is not an actual family. So this is a family that we have seen along my many years of doing real estate on the ground over my past 16 years. So a lot of families in this kind of spectrum usually are dual income. They have children, very low personal debt. Usually they have a vehicle or maybe they have no vehicle at all. And they're sitting on their first property, which is a HDB, starting from a BTO all the way when this was their matrimonial flat. And they had seen a paper gain. And this HDB has already hit its MOP, and they are in their late 30s. So they are in a dilemma situation of whether should they take the step to plan for their journey, or maybe should they just stay status quo. So let's have a quick look. And I'm going to talk about two methods that we have seen across the years, and how families has actually utilized this strategy to own one HDB and one condominium. So a typical route that we have also seen is what we call the do-nothing approach. Now, this is, of course, a very common approach that has no right and wrong. In fact, a lot of families are very happy owning their first HDB all the way until retirement age. And of course, at the retirement age, perhaps some families would then think about, maybe should I downgrade to a smaller HDB flat? Should I sell off and apply for a 2-room flexi when I'm 65 years old? Or maybe should I utilize the lease buyback scheme? And we're not talking about this route in the sense that it should be a route for everybody towards the one HDB and one condo concept. Because the one HDB and one condo concept, or whether should you sell your HDB to move on to 2 different properties, will have to depend on a few scenarios. Number one, most families belong to the dual income family. Number two, their TDSR as well as their family income is of a certain range in order to expand into the next stage. So this disclaimer right here is that the family is assumed to have the ability to upgrade to a condominium. However, they are contemplating, should they take action or should they not take action? And why is this important to understand is because usually our highest earning power and the longest loan tenure that we can take is usually between the age of mid-30s all the way to about 40 plus. Once we pass a certain stage, what's going to happen is that, firstly, your TDSR loaning capability will start to drop. the loan tenure will also start to drop, because loan tenure for your first purchase, in terms of not talking about refinancing, is based off a maximum limit of 65 years old minus your current age, and that is capped at 30 years. Of course, if you refinance, which is another topic, you can actually stretch to 75 years. And most of the time, if we look at the generic route of coming into a HDB property first for a BTO, that is a great setup, because this is sort of like an automated opportunity that you get to enjoy the equity build up over your years of firstly waiting for the construction. Secondly is the 5 years MOP period. So typically, if we talk about pre-COVID days or now, that HDB has already started to solve the delay in construction issues due to COVID, let's just assume that the average construction age is about 4 years. And after you collect your keys, in another 5 years' time, on your 9th year, you should be able to sell your property. And that is what we call the MOP year. So typically, for example, if you buy a 4-room at 450,000 in OCR mass market HDB estate, by the 9th year, it should be roughly assumed at about this range. We're not talking about prime areas. So let's just assume that it appreciated to 650K. This is what we call your trapped equity. And the only way to release this equity, if you want to put into your next property, is to sell the HDB. So, however, some families that we have helped, and of course, that we have seen over the many years, is that they prefer to keep the HDB as a rental play. Because HDB at 450,000 when you enter, it generates such a high rental yield return. And just a typical 4-room Pongo HDB right now, it can be easily rented between $3,500 to $4,000. Let's just take it averagely about $3,800. And the yield versus 3.8 times 12 over your purchase price is extremely strong. So some families, they prefer to keep this, but they want to purchase one more property. So how do they do it? Now, their mindset is that the HDB is technically just a tool for rental. And as long as they try to buy near MRT, no emotional attachment, because their end goal is that they want to own 2 properties. And the HDB must be very easy to rent out. So they try to buy near to MRT. And they want to own a condo is because they have a dual kind of need. They want to have a lifestyle change, as well as using the rental income of HDB to help in the expansion. Number 3 is that at the end of the age 65 target age, their retirement age, both properties will be fully paid, and they will either sell the HDB or sell the condo, or they might sell both and maybe buy another HDB somewhere else. For example, this family might be looking at selling their both properties and then maybe just move to like a brand new town to enjoy the brand new facilities. And of course, they like to plan ahead and protect their family. And using the dual approach, it can be achievable to own 2 properties with a cash top-up of $811 per month. So later we're going to see how does this family do it. Now let's talk about the first method. First method is a method whereby 2 names are already in the HDB apartment. Second method is whereby the HDB is owned with 1 owner and 1 occupier method. So I'm going to talk about the first method first. Now, first method in my context is that perhaps as you are listening to this, you already have 2 names in your HDB apartment, and thus, once you have 2 names in the HDB apartment, it cannot be reversed. However, there's still a way to own another condo, and of course, it will be slightly more painful because you do have to pay an ABSD of 20%. So let's kickstart from this first journey first. So somebody has bought a BTO at 450,000 at age 30. By the time they collect their keys, they're age 34. At age 39, their valuation, let's just put it at about 600,000. Be a little bit more conservative. However, they decided to buy another condominium. Now, this is assumed that typically, most of the time when I see these kind of cases on the ground, this family, most of the time when they approach us, maybe they already own this for 12 to 15 years, okay? But some families do have that capability that by the 9th year, they have fully paid off the BTO. There are cases like this that we have seen. Let's just assume that this family has paid off their HDB. what's going to happen is that when they buy this condominium, they are eligible to go for a 75% loan because they have cleared off the first mortgage. However, they will be taxed the ABSD. But some families still proceed to do it. Why? Because their mindset is that they are going to use the rental of this HDB apartment to compensate and recuperate the ABSD that they're going to put in here. If we base it on this example, this family will need 7 years of rental, and we calculate on a more conservative approach to reserve 1 month for your rental expenses, using 7 years to recuperate, and because there's no more monthly installment here and the HDB is fully paid already, this 3.8 can be used to fully cover back the ABSD for this amount that has been sunk in. And of course, on the 8th year onwards, they can then use this 3,008 to start to help out with this monthly installment of 5,670 for the next couple of years. So this is the mindset that goes behind this family. However, do take note of this thing. If this HDB is not fully paid, most of the time, we do not see this happening on the ground. Why? Because firstly, if this is not fully paid, the family can only loan 45% on the condominium, and to loan 45% means you have to put in a down payment of 55%, plus the 20% ABSD, that's a total of 75%, plus your BSD is 79%. So most of the time, we do not see this scenario on the ground unless the family is very, very cash rich. However, we do see a lot of cases where families have paid off the HDB and they do not want to sell it because maybe of emotional attachment, or they really just want to keep it for a security. Then they move on to pay ABSD for the second one. Now, what is the mindset of this family? Basically is that their plan is that by age 65, they will own 2 properties that has been fully paid. And coming back to the example here, the first 7 years, they do have to pay the full monthly installment. But from the 8th year onwards, once they have recuperated the ABSD amount, this is basically what they are looking at, is that the installment will then dip to about $1,870 per month from year 8 to year 26. And usually, the family have 3 types of mindset. One is that even if at age 65, the 2 properties that I own has no appreciation. That means I bought at 1.6 mil. After 26 years, it's still 1.6 mil. My HDB at MOP was worth 600,000. After, when I hit age 65, it's still at around 600,000. They will still have a total portfolio valuation of 2.2 million, which is still better than them not doing anything. Because we all know that in Singapore, I mean, in such a fast-paced country, sometimes it's a little bit hard to be having that discipline to put in our disposable income to good use. And of course, if you look at this context, a lot of families that have shared with us over the ground is that they are using, of course, real estate as a form of discipline as well, to put in money into the hard asset, and thus at the end, they can choose to sell both, pay off a HDB and keep the rest in cash, or they can either move back to the HDB and sell off the condo, or they can sell off the HDB and move to the condo. So basically, they have triple options right here. Now, second case, if HDB valuation stays constant, however, but the condominium appreciates by 50%. And take note that in 26 years' time, now it's the year 2023 plus 26 is about 2049. By the time, I think Singapore population probably will be about 8 to 10 million. I mean, by 2030, it's about 7 million. If it appreciates just by 50%, that's 2.2 million, your portfolio value is different. If it appreciates by 100%, then the portfolio value is definitely different. So let's move on very quickly to the second method, and then I'll pass on to George. Now, second method will be a preferred method. However, this second method must be planned right from the start. So whether you are going for a resale HDB or a BTO HDB, take note that you have a choice at the point of purchase. You can actually purchase it with just one name and your spouse be the essential occupier. So we call this the one owner and one occupier approach. However, the downside is that the occupier's spouse will not be able to utilize their income for the loan eligibility, as well as not being able to utilize their CPF towards a monthly contribution or down payment or monthly installment. And everything is dependent on the first owner only. So thus, not everybody will fall into this spectrum, or maybe not everybody will be comfortable with this kind of approach. But the key benefit is that once you hit your MOP stage and you decide to go for a second property, the essential occupier is treated as not owning any property. And thus, when you purchase this condo, there's no ABSD involved, which is why we struck off this. And you can also take a full 75% loan. So some families adopt this approach to ease into owning a HDB and a condo and not needed to pay ABSD. The only downside is that at the point of purchase here, the only owner's income has to be strong. And take note that we also put in a disclaimer here is that HDB policies will, they have the liberty to change policies at any point in time. Of course, through this journey, if HDB policies do change, then take note that this might not be possible. So this is currently possible right now, and very suitable only if you want to own one HDB and one condo, but this option has to be planned right from the start. And just a quick debunking of certain myths is that a lot of people think that it's not possible to own a HDB and a condo at the same time. Now, the myth is that if you already own a private property, be it a landed or condo, and you want to go back and purchase a HDB, that's not allowed. That's not possible, because the rule is that if you want to purchase a HDB property, you must clear off all private properties ownership, and there's a wait out period. However, you can have this if you can go through the HDB route first, own it, fulfill the MOP, and then you can purchase an additional condominium. And after that, you can still buy another condo, you can still buy another landed, and you can still keep your HDB. So that is allowed if you start from HDB first. So moving on, this is also possible in the sense that because of the fact that you don't need to pay off this property. Why is that so? It's because your occupier spouse don't need that clearance of the mortgage to qualify for 75% loan. So you can immediately purchase a condo provided you have the set of down payment ready. So you can take this 9 years to build a down payment for your condo, save up about 400K, which is about 44K per year, move on to this condominium, and thus you can start to own your second property. And of course, the end goal is that you can then utilize the rental to pay off your monthly installment for your HDB, utilize the balance amount to help out with your condominium monthly installment. Your net per month outflow is 3311, and this, of course, we haven't factored in your CPF contribution and things like that. So this is what families on the ground are also doing with the same end goal in mind. Now, before I hand over to George, we have this segment called the mindset review. So what is the mindset of this particular family? Now, their mindset is basically very simple. Before taking action into this, they also contemplated this, is that some of their friends say that, hey, I think you should just own the HDB. There's no need to go into another property. Why don't you just invest into an ETF fund of 5%? That means invest your disposable income. So since you already had a 400K down payment to get into a second property, why don't you just put it into the fund and contribute the same $811 per month into the fund as well? So let's take a look at this concept, which will work as well. So of course, when we talk about compound effect, it's extremely powerful, because by putting in 400,000 at the initial part, with just a 5% per annum return, putting in $811 per month, you will be able to earn $1.328 million in 26 years, because compound interest works best towards the end. So the most powerful gain will start perhaps at the 18-year to 26 years mark. And of course, at the end of 65 years, this family will then own a fully paid HDB as well as $1.8 million cash, including their initial 400,000 as well as their 811 cash contribution per month. And this is how the graph looks like. And thus you can see that at the back portion, this is the most powerful. However, this family also have this mindset in the sense that they will start to think that because we only have one life, in the sense that you will only start to live from 30 plus to 65, and every decision counts. This decision, of course, will then have an opportunity cost that the family might not be able to enjoy the condo as like a lifestyle kind of needs. And technically, an ETF fund in a compounding objective, provided that this family do not want to, or maybe do not have that knowledge, or don't want to take the risk into other types of alternative investment. They just want to look at a 5% very stable ETF fund using compound as a effective investment strategy, or a condominium as an investment strategy. This will be very, very similar to having like an illiquid asset as well, because you cannot technically kill off the compound interest by just liquidating the fund on the 5th or 10-year or 15-year mark, should they need the fund. And this concept allows them to also let inflation work in their favor, having two real estate. So just imagine if, let's say, this family needs the fund on the 10-year, if they were to kill off this compound kind of concept, they're going to lose out on the compounding energy right at the back. And technically, once they liquidate this investment, they'll have to restart the compound effect right from the start again. And thus, what is the mindset? The mindset is that compounding investing is safe. However, it is still like another golden goose that they cannot kill if they need funds. And even though, let's say, if they were to go into a condo and they need funds, they can still do equity loan extraction, or worst come to worst, they can sell the property. And they also cannot stay in the compound interest kind of golden goose. However, for condominium, they can get to enjoy the property. On the other hand, if they were to invest in the correct property, this is just an example of the recently TOP'd project at D19 Riverfront Residences. Of course, if you look at the average 3.5 years holding period, currently there's already about 259 positive profitable transactions. Averagely, the 3-bedder owners here are seeing a per annum paper gain of about 100,000, averagely at about 350,000 paper gain for the 3-bedroom owners right here. And the concept is this, is that even if, let's say, they were to invest in a wrong property, they can still treat these two properties as a form of forced savings, with one collecting rental, one allowing their family to live in. So the final slide here is this. You don't have to hold the property forever. And their mindset is that even if after 3 years they decided to sell, they can do that, because the sales stamp duty is at 3 years. And they are treating their HDB home as their base pivot home. They can always move back to their HDB. Second concept is that they can always sell the property if this condo starts to perform, and they can switch to other forms of property. So there's a bit of flexibility right there. And last but not least is that whether is it a new launch or resale condo, they have the liberty to choose, because the HDB acts as their base pivot home. So final outcome, there are 4 different outcomes right here. And what are these 4 different outcomes is that not taking action, even though if they have the ability to do that, at age 65, they're going to see their real estate portfolio to be about 600,000. Taking an action to be disciplined to invest in an ETF fund, this is their final portfolio value. Taking an action to go for an additional condominium and moving into the condo, renting out the HDB, is going to give them this portfolio value of about 2.2 million if there's no appreciation. And last but not least, if there were to be appreciation, the final portfolio value can range from around $2.8 to $3.5 million range. So by looking at this, I think it's also a matter about opportunity cost, of whether at age 65, when you look back, would you have gone for this or this versus the other two? So these are usually the key mindset that we've seen from families who adopt the one HDB and one condo approach. And I'm going to pass to George, who's going to kickstart case study 2. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Melvin. And maybe do a sound check first, just to make sure that everyone can hear. Okay, so sorry. No. Sorry, first time using a clicker. Right, so what we're going to be talking about is actually quite common, and I believe that's what a lot of Singaporeans are facing, which is when you're currently staying in your HDB BTO, especially when you apply for the BTO, probably about 4 or 5 years back. Most of the homeowners that we spoke with when they apply for the BTO, they're probably in the age of about 20 odd years, and then come the time of the construction plus MOP, they are probably in their prime age, as what Melvin mentioned about prime age in terms of the career as well as the ability to loan to its maximum potential. So you're probably kind of sitting on the fence, hey, should I clear off my existing loan because I've increasing income, and then I use the rest of the other funds to go into other form of investments, or should I then start to think about whether I want to move from my current HDB to a private condominium, or do I really want to leverage and maximize to a dual property approach? So right now what we're going to explore is actually a true case study that we successfully assisted our client from a HDB with a valuation of about $630,000 to $2.6 million. So this current family stays in a HDB in Woodlands, and they have combined CPF of about $500,000, cash savings of about $100,000. So they have been very prudent all these years, and during their free time, whenever they have fresh funds that is being injected, they will very prudently put their money into investments. So they needed help in terms of expanding their portfolio. So we did a few kind of scenarios. Of course, the very first scenario is when you stay put, do nothing. Nothing wrong with that. What you can do is, of course, if let's say you have the additional surplus of funds, you can either number one, to pay off your outstanding loan, to lead a debt-free life, and then you can kind of travel. Of course, some people want to do that because they do not want to tie down with obligations, and then at the same time they want to be able to utilize their funds for their kids' education or their lifestyle. On the other hand, if let's say they were to stay true to that, they want to do nothing, the valuation at the point of time when we check is about $630,000. We are talking about a trapped equity of $200,000 if you do not sell. Of course, fast forward to 1 year later, as we just checked recently, the valuation have gone up a little bit from 630 to about 670. So you have a trapped equity about $230,000. We have actually looked through the past trends in terms of HDB's price performance. Typically, upon MOP to about the 6-year mark, that will usually be the highest growth. After that, that will typically taper down due to the fact that you also have other classes of HDB, BTO that reaches MOP, and then that will also dilute the kind of growth that you can potentially see. So, of course, on the other hand, is if you choose to sell at $630,000, you can unlock equity of about $200,000. Scenario 2 is if you choose to take action and then you unlock the equity of $200,000, what can you buy? Of course, utilizing our PLB's moat analysis, we are able to help our clients identify the type of properties to buy into. So back in 2022, when our clients decided to embark on this journey, of course, this journey we have to do quite a couple of stress tests as well as to make sure that we are being prudent in terms of our approach. So for this case, they choose to go into the 4 beta EC. Of course, with this 4 beta EC, why we go into the 4 beta is also part of our moat analysis criteria, where you have the rarity effect. Of course, if you'd like to find out more, do subscribe or to click onto our QR code at the end of this webinar. We'll be happy to showcase more examples with you. Towards the end, they purchased a 4 beta at $1.375 million, 1161 PSF, and of course, at 2022, 1161 PSF is considered to be something that's quite attractive. Looking back now, it's definitely very attractive. Fast forward to 2023, the last transacted as well as the valuation, they are currently sitting on a paper gain of $164,000. Let us take a look at the next step, because right now, NAME is the new currency. We also want to kind of see whether do you want to leverage and then to buy into 2 properties separately. Of course, doing so is quite highly leveraged, and we have to make sure that that is something that's comfortable for you in terms of the finances as well as your lifestyle obligation. So 2002, they have actually bought into EC that's just recently MOP. So of course, what we are looking at is there is very minimal downtime. Usually what we want to do is we want to be able to achieve the sale and then concurrently purchase into something so that we can recycle the funds as soon as possible. Back then, in about early 2023, we are in the high interest rates facility environment. Interest rate was hovering at about 3.5, 3.6%. So the best way, of course, to mitigate in terms of the high interest facility is to buy into a new launch where it is progressive payment, and that's also mitigate and to hedge against the high interest facility. This was purchased at about early 2023, 1.282 million. PSF is about 2004. Of course, this is a slightly smaller property. Why they choose to buy into this is number one, in terms of their approach is to mitigate against a high interest. Secondly is if, let's say, at towards the TOP stage, the property is good, they can choose to sell. Otherwise, they can hold on a bit longer because it's a brand new property. You still have a very healthy balance sheet. You can then move into rental play as well. All in, we are projecting a potential yield of about 3.7%, which is quite conservative in today's time. And as we take a look in terms of their expansion portfolio, from 2023, if let's say they choose not to sell, currently they are sitting on a valuation of 670, of a trapped equity of $230,000. Of course, if let's say you have additional cash, you can then put all these funds into other form of investments, generating your potential yield. On the other hand, if let's say they took action, which is the case for our clients, they have actually achieved a combined asset value of $2.65 million, currently sitting on a paper gain of $164,000. Of course, what they are trying to achieve is to expand the property portfolio. And some of the things that actually went through their mind and the kind of things that we discussed between the clients and ourselves is that growth of HDB prices will naturally plateau typically after the 6-year mark once they reach its MOP due to the competition surrounding the entire area. Number two is they want to immediately recycle the funds, and with the funds that are made available, they want to quickly enter into the market. In fact, during the period while we actually opt for a brand new launch, the mindset in terms of the new launch is that you might not always get the unit that you want, largely dependent on the ballot number. So there is some missed opportunity over there. And then that was one of the reasons why they do not want to miss the boat and then they want to quickly enter into the market. So the high interest rate facility is actually to hedge against by buying into a new launch property to have the progressive payment. And of course, the kind of mindset is that whether you want to go into a new launch or to a resale condo, is that resale condo, you can still have the first mover advantage, which we will be happy to share more with you. For this case, they actually buy into the newly MOP EC, and actually typically during the newly MOP EC stage, there are quite a healthy transactions upon MOP, and then you can still utilize on the first mover advantage. And last but not least, they wish to leverage and take on a good debt. So these are the kind of mindset as well as a discussion point between our clients and I. And so I think with that, we've come to the end of this case study, and I must pass on to Yu Rong.
All right, thank you, George. Very long case study for the previous two because there's a lot of numbers. It showcases the journey of, especially the first two case study, especially for HD upgraders. We want to make sure that we show you in more detail how the entire journey entails. So my case study will be a little bit shorter, but I think what I want to cover is that number one, of course, trying to expand the portfolio is always good, but not necessary that it is always a plus point. Were there other negative potential pitfalls that you need to look out for? And so that I'm going to share with you is how this investor actually lose out 200K in profits over a 1-year period by being a little bit too safe. Okay, so let's kick off a little bit on the profile first. In 2022, I met this client. He's a single, owns 57 years balance lease HDB in the central region. And of course, the concern that he wants to restructure was, okay, I think the HDB is getting a little bit old. I might want to let go before, the prices actually come down, especially after, prices have started to climb up recently due to COVID scenario. And he's thinking of, okay, maybe I want to upgrade to a 2-bedder condo, essentially more for lifestyle purposes, but also they want to keep the installment low so that it's not over leveraging. And but most importantly, they don't want to buy a bad property. It doesn't need the property to have a lot of appreciation, just not a bad property that will actually suffer in pricing while they get to enjoy their condo facilities. So my recommendation after I did the financial analysis was, I say hey, I think the best scenario for a good balancing point is to actually go for a 3-bedder. Right, so this 3-bedder allows you the option of having a little bit more space. When you get married with your girlfriend, you want to have kids next time, it allows for a more comfortable expansion in terms of space. And of course, I calculated that based on the income as well as the installment, actually it's quite comfortable for him. Right. So eventually we saw some properties and we land up with 2 options. One option is actually a 3-bedder, $1.5 million in the rest of Central Region location. The other one is actually a 2-bed, 2-bath, $1.2 million rest of Central Region location, which was originally what he wanted in size. 2-bed, 2-bath, just good enough in space, etc. And I mentioned that actually this 3-bedder that we saw is actually very good. Once I step into the house, this unit is not like a fire sale unit where, you know, like it is in not a very good condition. Actually, the condition is well maintained. In fact, it's a little bit renovated. The owner has already moved out already because they have some reason that need to let go of the property. So I think overall, in terms of condition, everything is of very, very good value. And I said, once I step out of the house, I told my client that you should buy this because if we don't decide today for this, I think it will not longer be available the next day. But of course, after a discussion, they decided to go for the 2-bed, 2-bath original plan, 1.2 million. And fast forward in 1 year's time, this is only just 1 year's time, that 2-bedder that we got in at 1.2 million actually appreciated by 50,000. So that's pretty good, 1.25 million. However, that 3-bedder that I recommended in terms of valuation wise, based on the latest transacted price, actually went up from 1.5 million all the way to 1.75 million. That's 250K. And over here, we see at the opportunity cost between choosing something that is too safe at times when we have the ability to actually make a bigger option, it could be 200K over 1 year. So one of the main mindset takeaways for this case study is more on number one, while we want to expand, we don't want to make sure that we take unnecessary risks while expanding our portfolio. We also want to make sure that we do not go to the other extreme where maybe we are a little bit too conservative, too safe. And in this scenario is where we want to keep the monthly installment way lower than what is actually comfortable for this client. The other thing to take away is in the scenario that if you can go for a 2-bed, 2-bath or 3-bedder, usually when we say, like what George mentioned, buy bigger is whenever possible. Buy bigger whenever possible as long as within a safe financial calculation. The reason is I would say that generally 3-bedder onwards will be one of the better choices because we are catching a few things at the same time. Number one, if today I'm owning a 1-bedder or like a 2-bed, 1-bath, who will be my exit audience? So if they are buying for own stay, likely they are single, startup family. Usually the reason why they are buying that sizing is because probably they are at the start of their career. Pricing wise, their budget wise will also be a little bit limited. Alternatively, the other side of the coin is your target audience will actually be investors. So investors, they are a little bit on the logical side. What they're looking at probably will be what is the entry price? What is my rental yield? And they can go for any location, right? So what it means is when we have a lot of target audience that is investors or with a slightly smaller budget, it also limits the capital upside appreciation that we can have for our portfolio. And why we say 3-bedder is because it captures two sides of the coins. We capture a lot of HD upgraders. Maybe a lot of them started off with the first BTO, like what George mentioned. They have a family size, 4-room flat or 5-room flat. They actually have 3 bedrooms now. And they want to upgrade, and likely what they want for their family is they need usually at least 3 bedrooms. So that's why 3-bedroom is a good sweet spot for HD upgraders. On the other end, we also have people who have expanded their portfolio, right? So maybe they are now at their retirement phase, and then they might be owning a landed properties, they might be owning a condo property, and they say, I want to come back, I want to downsize, I want to right size to a smaller portfolio value so I can unlock cash for my retirement. And then they say because they're used to that big size, they also say that, oh, I think I need at least a 3-bedder. So we actually capture, number one, own-stay buyers that have an emotional need to be in a specific location, either due to school, workplace, or their parents to facilitate their lifestyle. Second thing, we capture a bigger market audience, upstream upgraders. We also capture right-sizing audience. So in fact, when you're at least consider a 3-bedder, you actually capture a lot more exit audience. That is the reason why more demand equals to faster appreciation. So I have completed my case study 3, and I'll hand over to Melvin.
Thank you, Yu Rong. By the way, our Q&A panel is open. Feel free to key in any questions that you want to ask us. And of course, with the limitation of time, we are unable to answer any questions during this particular webinar. But what we do is that our team will consolidate all the questions. All the participants for all our webinars, sorry, you'll be able to receive a PDF deck with all the questions and answers to your questions that you asked tonight. I was seeing some questions on the screen, just to clarify for some of you who might be very interested in the one owner and one occupier kind of method. Now, that method, unfortunately, can only be done at a point of purchase. So if you are already owning a HDB resale property now, or BTO that you have already lived in right now, you cannot reverse that approach anymore. You have to, of course, make do with the current status of having two names within your HDB property. However, if you were to sell a HDB and you really want to go for the one HDB or one condo approach, you can sell your HDB and you can repurchase a HDB resale property and restart from scratch. And at the point of purchase, you can then purchase a HDB resale property with one owner name and one occupier name. However, the risk is that this is also considered, in my context, pretty risky because there are two risk points. Number one is that if, let's say, you repeat that and you do that method, and if HDB were to change the policies at any point in time, then that method would have failed. Second risk is that you are losing out time in terms of fulfilling another fresh set of 5 years MOP period. And with time going by, we always have to remember that private property is lesser in terms of overall supply, and it tends to move up faster than HDB property. So by losing out another 5 years, you run the risk that you might be priced out of the next condominium or landed property compared to making and taking the action right now. So that's just to clarify some of the questions. Now let's move on to case study 4. Now this case study 4 is a family with the mindset that they want to utilize two frameworks. Number one is that they want to utilize the profit from the properties made from the first to the second and from the second to the third. And they like to adopt this framework by adopting the profit cycle framework. Let's have a look. So this is a family, and they bought this DBSS HDB in the past. Now this scheme is already decommissioned. It used to be called the privatized BTO scheme, whereby it's a HDB BTO, but it's being built and developed by a private developer. Dual income family, and of course, this family, they own this 5-room property at Clementi, and at year 0, this was the phase that they were waiting for their keys, and of course, once they collected their keys, 5 years later, this was the value of the property at the MOP mark. And of course, they exited the property in year 2019 at 928,000. As you can see, the paper gain is about 193,000. Now, should this family have waited for just another 3 years, they would have made another $32,000 if they have waited and only sold on the 12-year mark in 2022. And of course, you might be wondering, hey, why is it that there was a rise at this period, and then over here, towards the next 3 years, the increment is more marginal? Now, this is a usual phenomenon in the sense that because this already took you 9 years, and when you enter into any BTOs, most of the time, you will be able to see that gain at the MOP mark on the 9th or 10th year. And let's take a look at what this family did. And what they have done is that they then switch to a new project. So they exited in year 2019. They switched to a new launch property, and they entered at $1.735 million at about 1,006 plus PSF in the year 2019, in the same year. Now, because they have made this move, they then get to enjoy the second profit cycle by enjoying another $368,000 because of this move. Now, should they have waited to earn the extra $32,000 from their HDB appreciation, and they only exited in the year 2022, they will then have to purchase back this same property, should they want to, at the $2.135 million mark. So what technically happened was that when they exited from here, step 1, they did a switch in 2019, bought a new launch property, and then waited for TOP in 2022. At the point of TOP, based on the transactions back then that has already been done by some other owners, the valuation back then was already $2.135 million, thereabout, plus minus about $2,000 PSF. So they are already seeing a $400,000 paper gain, but they didn't sell it at the point of TOP. They rented it out for 1 year. And basically, what happened was that from that 1 year mark, they rented out. And 1 year later, we sold it for them at 2.19 million. So this was a 980 square feet, 3-bedder. They sold on the 4th year mark of owning it. And what happened was that they then went on to buy a bigger property at about 1,003 plus square feet, and then they moved into this resale property. So technically, they are going with a one property at a time approach because they didn't want to go into two properties. They love to combine their names for this approach. So they're going with the first BTO, MOP, they did a swap. This is a new launch. 3 years later, they rent out for 1 year just to see how the market was. On the 4th year, they sold this newly TOP project, moved to a resale, moved in. And of course, what will be their plan moving forward? It also depends on their objectives and the market. However, what you can see is that technically this move, I would say majority of the funds for the down payment of each step came from the previous profit of the previous property. So they like to take the profit and then keep moving on to the next one to expand their portfolio. And their mindset is basically using the disparity effect that we always talk about in PLB, is to switch when the profit cycle for that particular project has reached so-called like a high point for that particular season. Of course, if we go back and look at this, will this property continue to appreciate? Maybe yes, of course. Maybe every year you will see like a 5% gain. However, their key methodology is that when it has hit that profit cycle in an accelerated fashion, they want to choose to exit that, enjoy the margin, and then transfer that to the next property by a property portfolio kind of expansion model. So this was their methodology, and of course, currently they have already bought a bigger property that's worth about $2.4 million, and that's how you can see how from 730 over thousand all the way towards the $2.4 million portfolio. So they believe that each property appreciates at a certain season, and they love newer properties. But even though now they bought a resale, but in the past the first two were new properties, and they like to use the profit cycle strategy to grow their investment initial down payment. And they hope not to touch their personal savings for the down payment for the next future homes. So basically, they like to use the profit from the previous one and then rinse and repeat. So with that, let me pass on to George for case study number 5. So we hope that you're staying with us because we still have 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we still got 5 to go. And George, back to you.
All right. So I think this is a very interesting and unique case. Probably some of them might be, facing this kind of scenario. And I think as we are entering into an aging population, I think we mentioned earlier in one of our NOTG episode as well, that most of the home buyers right now, they are potentially sitting on, inheritance funds. And how to kind of maximize the potential use of the inheritance funds. So for this case, our client, we have been assisting this client for the past couple of years, as well as various other properties. So they have this $1.9 million of cash inheritance after the sale of the other properties. So they're kind of sitting on the fence and then thinking, what do they want to do next? Of course, we apply the needs as well as their wants analysis. What they want to be able to achieve is to move from their current 4-bedder in the OCR area to a 4-bedder in the RCR area, as well as also to be near to certain schools that they wish to enroll their kids into. Family of 4, inheritance of about $1.9 million of cash. And then potentially we did some form of financial calculations. They are looking at about $220,000 of cash proceeds from the sale of their current property, combined CPF of $580,000. Total cash and CPF, we are seeing a very healthy amount of $2.7 million. There are a lot of different ways that you can potentially pen this situation. Of course, let's take a look. Right now, the kind of properties that they want to move into RCR 4-bedder, looking at about $2.8 million. Of course, we have to factor in the buyer stamp duty of $100 over $1,000. This will bring the entire price quantum to be about $2.9 million. The very first thing is, of course, with the $1.9 million, let's say you want to set aside about $100,000 to do a gut renovation. This could be a potential forever home. 4-bedder is pretty comfortable. RCR area. You can reduce the loan obligation to about $300,000. Monthly mortgage will be about $1,300. This will be very comfortable. You can use all your CPF to service your mortgage, keep the rest of your cash, for your daily family needs. And I think this will definitely be one of very comfortable lifestyle moving forward. Of course, on the other hand, the other school of thoughts is they want to see how they can maximize the $2.7 cash and CPF. Firstly, fulfill their stay as well as their needs, which is this 4-beta RCR area to be close to a certain school. This must definitely be addressed first. And then we talk about the kind of investment. Of course, how we arrive at this number, we'll share more with you later on as we move on to the slides. The considerations, of course, we have to look in terms of the financing ability. This wasn't a very straightforward case because there was a certain cap in terms of their loan amount, and then we have to kind of time their cash proceeds in terms of the various uses of the properties and then how they can potentially utilize the funds to kind of bridge the delta between their loan eligibility as well as the loan requirement. The next thing is, of course, they want to buy into an area that has the potential growth. Of course, we also have to utilize our moat analysis to help them shortlist the next investment property. So the very first thing is they wish to buy into this 2.83, which we have already identified, and then they set aside $100,000 of renovation, utilize about $2 million of cash as well as CPF. We kind of have a bit of, what do you call it? Balancing act, seesaw. Yeah, so we can't down too much cash and CPF over here because that will affect the next type of property they can buy into. We also want to be mindful in terms of the entry product of the investment property. They will have to take about $900,000 in terms of the loan. Monthly cash, monthly mortgage would be about $4,000 after reducing from the 1,260 CPF OA contribution. Cash top up, we are looking at about 2,740. Of course, if you isolate and then just take a look at this example, it might seem that, hey, 2,740, is it a hefty amount that I need to fork out? Especially when I have 2 kids and then I want to set aside some of the cash for their monthly expenses. Next, we take a look at the kind of investment portfolio. 2-bed, 2-bath, 1.23. You can still find something 2-bed, 2-bath in today's context for this price point. Including buyer stamp duty, that will bring us about $1.27 million. You down about $500,000 in terms of a cash and CPF. Take on about $700,000 of loan. Monthly mortgage is at about $3,300. For this particular unit, rental conservatively is at $3,900. Right now, some of the units have already transacted at about $4,100. So you're going to take a more conservative approach. Once you take a look at that, we want to move on to the next step. Now, bear in mind that for this 2.83, when you are taking a $900,000 loan, the monthly cash top-up is 2,740. We're going to move on to the next slide. For this 2-bed, 2-bath, because of the rental obligation as well as inflow of funds, we're going to take into consideration the property tax, MCSE, because property tax, you're on the non-owner occupied tax rate, which will typically be higher. MCSE will also be borne by the owners themselves. And then, of course, in terms of mortgage, you have a split in terms of principal as well as the interest. Why we want to showcase the P&I is because if, let's say, in time of a rental down market, which are some of the things that we have actually discussed with our clients, you also want to be taking a look at, potentially at least be able to cover your interest. Whatever you're putting into your principal, it will still come back to you upon the successful sale. Inflow of funds, you have a rental income of about $3,900, OA contribution of $1,260. When you're talking about the inflow as well as the outflow, you're talking about net cash flow of about $1,480. Pumping this back into your 4-bed own stay, you can reduce your monthly mortgage obligation from 2,740 all the way down to 1,260. This is, of course, factoring into your MCST as well as your property tax. All in all, when we are taking a look at either of these for this combined portfolio, you firstly reduce the loan obligation. Of course, once you do that, the very first thing is if you choose not to buy anything and you down all your cash in, you can lead a very comfortable life. You do not need to fork out additional cash in terms of your monthly mortgage. On the other hand, if you do leverage to buy 2 properties, combined value at 4.05 as compared to $2.8 million, but the cash top-up is just at 1,260, and that will easily allow you to increase your property value from 2.8 all the way to $4.05 million at just 1,260. So these are the various kind of different strategies that we approach. Of course, we have identified the purchase price. We have kind of used this amount. We play around with the loan amount, either to take on a higher loan amount. Of course, if you were to take on a higher loan amount, will this be something that the family will be comfortable with, especially taking into consideration of their monthly family obligation? Taking a higher loan amount will then result them in the ability to buy more options if they want to. On the other hand, if let's say they wish to reduce a loan amount to below $900,000, that would leave them with very little cash for the next down payment in terms of the next property. And then when we take a look at this option, $1.1 odd million, perhaps they couldn't buy something that can allow them to exit comfortably. Hence, the kind of sweet spot that we are talking about earlier on, when we play around these different scenarios, is to take on a loan about mid $900,000, and yet they are still able to purchase something comfortable at a $1.2 million range. Some of the strategies that we adopted is, of course, in terms of the loan eligibility, bearing in mind that your income, your age will also determine your loan amount, not forgetting that you're also subjected to the TDSR as well as the stress test rate. So any decreasing in terms of the loan amount will also have a ripple effect in terms of the next property option. The next one is in terms of the liquidity. Now, when we talk about liquidity, that's extremely important, because if you choose to complete one property before the other, that will also potentially affect how you can utilize the funds to increase your loan delta to bridge to the loan amount that you need to go for. And I would say this is actually one of the most important criteria when it comes to buying two properties and utilizing the funds more effectively. And last but not least, in terms of the purchase options. So just want to kind of run through what goes behind the buyer's or the client's mindset. Number one is they wish to go for a long-term goal. Especially when they're in their mid-30s, they have the available funds that they can potentially use. They want to go into the long-term goal instead of immediately reducing their debt obligations. Number two is they're still young. They can still take on a calculated risk approach. Of course, in terms of the calculated risk approach, we also talk about different strategies in terms of increasing the stress test rate or increasing the interest rates. And of course, once we do that, there are certain strategies that we can still adopt. Worst case scenario is, number one, if let's say the rental market starts to soften and then the interest starts to go up, what they can then potentially do is to extend the loan tenure, number one. Number two is, worst come to worst, they can reduce the loan or the rental amount just to make sure that at least the rental cover the expenses. Of course, that will involve a higher cash flow. They might just want to kind of manage out their finances. Thirdly, the worst case is, they can just sell off their investment property, or otherwise, if let's say all goes well, of course, we want to also give a disclaimer is that it's a cyclical event, and we want to take on a calculated approach. And what they ideally would want to do is they want to go into expansion phase first, especially at this young age, and then that will potentially assist them for their future consolidation phase. And I think with that, we've come to the end of this case study, and I'll pass on to Yu Rong.
Thank you very much, George. Very interesting case study. I think a lot of times, for this specific client, it's more on like an inheritance kind of client. But I would say that generally, when we have really built our wealth to a certain level, one of the primary considerations is always wealth preservation. While we continue to want to expand in a very safe and steady approach to continue to broaden the portfolio size. The other thing that, just a quick one in terms of covering downside while we expand our property portfolio is, of course, we might be taking out more loans. And usually when we take out more loans, one of the things is we also advise our clients, right, to also have term insurance to cover their downside. What if I am building this portfolio for my family and I happen to pass away? We don't want to pass on this debt obligation to our loved ones, but we can use term insurance, a very low cost. We're not talking about whole life insurance, basically a very low cost kind of insurance, just to cover in case, in the worst case, I pass away. I'm able to leave a portfolio that is actually debt free. All right? If I have extra funds and I decide to pay down the house fully, I actually deprive the opportunity that in the worst case, actually my loved ones can actually probably inherit another $1 million or $1.5 million because I've covered that using insurance mechanism. Okay, my next case study will be a lot of times as a first property buyer, a lot of times, usual traditional kind of advice would be, hey, I think, like we should start off with a HDB property. And most of the time when I analyze the client's profile, I do some financial calculation, and if I discover that they are actually able to go a private property, I would probably advise them that, hey, maybe you might want to consider just skipping the HDB route, and let me show you how you can potentially build up this portfolio if we just skip the HDB portion. So for this buyer, this is what we are using. We opt to skip over the HDB. We started off with a condo property instead. And number one, because of the time in the market, we are able to expand very quickly to a landed property. But of course, this scenario requires a few things to happen all at the same time. Number one, 2014. I head over, as this is also one of my friends, I just head over to have like a casual breakfast. So we cook together in the kitchen, and they say, hey, I think, Yu Rong, I think maybe you should buy a property. They are staying in the in-laws' place. Right? So I say, we don't need a property, but I think it is good. Maybe we just buy a property. They just started out working, and they say, because there is not much down payment funds, income is just starting out, probably they should just go for a resale HDB, and then just hold the property there in case anytime when they want to have their own space, they can move out of their in-laws' place. And I say, if you don't need a house, then why you want to buy a HDB? And I say why not you consider to invest in a condo instead? And so after doing some financial analysis, we realized that, okay, based on the down payment that we come up with, of course, with a little bit of support from parents on the down payment side, we eventually got into a one-bedder condo investment in the RCR location, and the entry price was 760K. And so that was in 2014. This is a high-rise building near MRT station. It took about 3.5 years to construct. And so in 2018, we collected the keys. And actually, I told my friend that, 2018 when we collect the keys, I think we should start to sell. We should start to sell this property, and then we should recycle this fund either to a bigger condo. And then they say, maybe I can try to rent it out for a while first. And at that point of time, it is not like the last 2 years where rental market was crazy. Last year, rental actually increased by overall 30% for the private property market, 35% for HDB pricing. Those were the days where, because of total debt servicing ratio cooling measure implementation in 2013, actually the property price index for private property is coming down. Okay, so what happened is, whenever a condo project TOP, you realize that the rental pricing in the area will drop. So last time, tenant no longer, they won't go into a 2-year contract. They want to go a 1-year contract because every year they can change to another property at a lower rent. And most of the time when there is a TOP project that comes up, there are a lot of units to choose from, and it's all about which unit is at a lower price to rent it out. And so eventually they decide, okay, maybe I just rent it out first. So after we rent out this property already, because then after we rent out this property for a while, it was to a student. It was to a student basically because their school schedule is actually very tight. They are always not at home. When we decide that we want to sell the property interim, it was not easy actually to arrange for viewings. So actually one of the key learning points as well for investors is, number one, a lot of times many investors will choose that, okay, I want to reduce my out-of-pocket monthly installment. So the best case scenario is that I rent out this property while I look for a buyer slowly, right? So I don't have to count my own monthly installment. But most of the time when we opt for this approach, definitely it is lower risk because there is no money out of pocket. But most of the time, the trade-off is these tenants usually do not give you optimized viewing appointments. Maybe sometimes 1 month, 2 months, you only get one viewing appointment. You might miss out on the most critical and most potential buyer that could actually buy your property. So what happened was, it was not easy to arrange for viewing. When the project TOP, this one bedder that we bought actually is worth about $900,000. Worth about $900,000. And what happened was that the same HDB pricing, if they were to buy a HDB, same thing from 2014 all the way until about 2018, actually the pricing of HDB is stagnant. Okay, so we bought about, how much did you buy? We bought about 760K, 900K, so that is actually 140K profit for one bidder. Very good. And so we decided that, okay, the viewings cannot be facilitated. So what happened was, eventually, COVID hit in early 2020. So they still continue to rent it out. Early 2020, COVID hit. And what happened was we managed to miraculously sold this unit during the circuit breaker. The buyers didn't even came to physically see the unit because we are able to have virtual tour, video home tour shot of this unit. The buyers were actually able to sort of like visualize the whole, and because during circuit breaker, it becomes common to buy houses without seeing a property when you want to. And so eventually we got the deal done. However, it was actually transacted at 840K. So imagine, TOP that time, we can sell 900K, but because of COVID, there was a slight fear in the market. Some of the transactions took longer, and eventually we managed to let go at 840,000. We couldn't optimize the maximum sale price because the general building pricing has come down a little bit. And so we let go at 840K, which is still a profit, but we collected a number of years of rental. And then what happened was this friend of mine was asking, so now, right, should we sell this rate? Should we buy 2 condos, one under the husband's name, one under the wife's name? Or maybe we should consider just going straight to a landed property. The other thing to note is, I have seen a lot of young professionals, right? So when they are 27, 26 years old, usually the mindset when they start getting into the workforce is, I think I start with HDB first because I'm not sure how my career trajectory is going to move, whether is it going to be a high flyer, etc. And I've seen many a times, it is good that sometimes of these buyers, right, that maybe one of the positive of not starting your HDB is that once we kill out your HDB, we actually have this thing called a 5-year minimum occupancy period. And during these 5 years, it will be very painful that some of these clients of mine or friends of mine, they might have their income have an exponential jump. Sometimes it's a 100% jump between a 3 to 4 years period. And then they realize that they have a lot of savings. They find good opportunities in the private property market. However, they are not able to take action because there is a 5-year lock-in period. So one of the key incentives of sometimes not kicking off a HDB property is that you allow yourself to have that flexibility to actually maneuver into the different options when opportunity arises. We are not trying to force the hand, but we are getting ready for opportunity to come by, and we can actually take action and pick it up. And so this discussion, actually we had a live debate 2 weeks ago where we actually talked about whether is it better to have like 2 condos or is it 1 landed property. And this friend of mine eventually decided that landed property is more suitable for them because they decided that they want to stay with one set of their parents to actually facilitate family planning. So if you are a multi-generation kind of a buyer, you need the bigger space, then landed property definitely is one good option to go because of limited supply. There are only 74,000 units, making up 4% of the entire residential market. There cannot be new land that is being sold by developers to create more landed properties. So the supply is limited. But we are going to continue to see continuous demand for the landed segment. And so in the long term wise, of course, pricing for landed will go up while this couple gets to enjoy that space with their family. And so we decided to go for a landed. And what is interestingly, even though in 2020, we did not manage to optimize that one bidder investment, because initially it was 900K, we let go at about 840K without viewing physically the property. That is also a good opportunity when there was fear in the ground. Will this be a repeat of the previous financial crisis where prices come out at 30%? Because the last time we saw a major financial crisis was back in 2008, and prices came out by 30% and eventually has a sharp rise 1 year later. And this time, some buyers or many buyers are probably thinking, hey, I think we should wait because I think the market will start crashing. And this was actually one of the best opportunities to re-switch the portfolio whenever there is fear in the market. And so we managed to identify a landed property at $2.8 million. Of course, we saw many landed properties. And a few tips on landed properties is, in this area that we're exploring, there are 2-story landed property zoning as well as there are 3-story landed property zoning. And eventually, we got a terrace that is of 3 stories level. Rationale is because usually in the same area, if I can go to a 3-story building, I would usually advise my clients to go to the 3-story land plot. Rationale is because you can build more floor spaces in the same amount of land space. So that allows, number one, more space for a family currently. Second thing is, in the future, if you want to do rebuilding and maximize more space, you can do so. So we managed to identify this property that is 3 stories high. There are no granage room in the level 1. Level 2, there's 2 bedrooms. Level 3, there are 2 bedrooms. Good enough for the current family size. And actually, this house can still be further increased by adding on to an attic level in the future. So there is still additional potential to actually maximize more spaces to actually increase the property value. So we went for a $2.8 million freehold inter-terrace. And in 2023, now, very, very conservatively, this can actually be $3.5 million. One of the reasons why we are able to jump straight for a 1-bedroom condo to the landed market, 2 things. Because there are a lot of profile of youngsters that are going to see exponential growth in this very golden period between 28 years old to 35 years old. In a short span of 3 to 4 years' time, you might be amazed or surprised that your income increased by 100% to 150%. This allows to give you the income eligibility to take a higher loan amount. Second thing is also, because of the increase in income, it allows you to save very quickly for the down payment to actually expand your portfolio very quickly. And because the timing is so correct, we know that the COVID bull run pushed up all the landed property prices, and now it is worth at least $3.5 million with actually the upgrades that they have actually included into the house with some renovations. Actually, this house, their home can probably easily sell up to about $3.8 million. So 3.5 is actually quite a very conservative figure. So a few key learning points is, number one, whenever you are thinking of expanding your property portfolio, we want to consider carefully whether we want to start renting, how long we want to rent. I want to make sure that we are able to have that flexibility to decide that we can stop the rental so that we can sell the house effectively without a tenant, because we will be able to sell to own stayers who don't want to wait. Second thing, this also applies to your refinancing when we want to refinance loans to save interest. We want to make sure that refinancing rental contracts be in line with your property plans, give ourselves that flexibility to make changes to our plans. Second thing is flip ASAP. So we had a scenario where when it reaches a potential TOP area, we can consider flipping to expand the property portfolio instead of renting it out first. Thirdly, always choose the better asset class. As long as the property is good, we can always be able to know that time and compound interest will work in our favor to expand the property portfolio. And of course, lastly, in this scenario, for this specific friend of mine, the landed property is more suitable for them. But maybe for some of the audience out there, 50% of y'all might find that the 2-condo approach will be better because you can start leveraging on other people's money through rental income. You can also reduce your over portfolio, even though a portfolio size can be the same. Let's say, for example, a $4 million landed property versus 2 condos that are $2 million each. You realize that the monthly installment that you need to come up with is actually half for the own stay, because the other property that is being rented out is probably going to be fully subsidized by your tenant. So that's how we actually make use of other people's money and reduce our own risk, giving ourselves more liquidity, which you can choose to improve your lifestyle, or you can choose to park it as another form of savings to accelerate your overall wealth. And now I will pass it back to Melvin.
All right, so hope that everybody is still very energized at 9:18 p.m. right here. So we still have the last 3 case studies to go. Very quickly, case study number 7. This is a very interesting case study because when we're helping this family, young couple, and both husband and wife, they are working. They are both permanent residents in Singapore. So they do hold, of course, an existing property when we first met them. So let's have a look. They already held a 2-bedroom condo at District 16. They were already living in the property. It's not for tenancy. It's basically for their own matrimonial home. And because of the status as a PR, you do have to pay a 5% ABSD on your property purchase if it's your first property. So let's just have a look at the scenario back then. So when they first bought basically the property, we met them while they were at the age of 32 years old. So basically this property, they first purchased it from the resale market. And at age 32, this 2-bedroom that they were holding on, it had made a slight profit margin. Not a lot, because when they bought it, it was probably in the range of close to about $800,000. So they were seeing like a very marginal jump. They have held it for about 3 to 4 years already, and they are thinking about what's next. So their plan is that how can they then start to expand their portfolio, because they're also doing well in their jobs, singularly, dual income, and they are trying to see, is there a possibility for them to expand into 2 sets of different properties, one for rental and one basically for their own needs. So because of the fact that they are both PRs, of course in Singapore, you are allowed to buy HDB resale property. However, the key criteria is that both PRs must be married and both must have the PR status for at least 3 years. And that is a key criteria to own a HDB resale property. For them, they are on the expansion kind of investment mentality. So what happened was that we then analyzed the existing 2-bedder. We felt that at that point in time during that particular year, the movement in terms of pricing was pretty, I would say, I wouldn't use the word stagnation, but I would say that in terms of the increase, in terms of year by year valuation gain, it was not really doing very well because they had already enjoyed that profit cycle when the property has TOP'd. But they were basically the family that bought over that newly TOP property, hold it for about 4 years, and thus we helped them to exit at $850,000, and then we moved them to a 3-bedroom, also in the East area, at $1.2 million. So back then, when they first bought this property, after we shifted them, they were about 33 years old of age, and then that was the time that they started to want to expand. So after they have settled this property, 1 year later, what happened was that they started to ask us to plan for the second one, which is this one. So they took about 1 year to renovate, settle down, move in, and they have a baby already. And then they wanted to take their time just to settle down for about 1 year. So take note that when you want to do an expansion of portfolio, you don't have to rush into doing it like immediately. And of course, some families do prefer to do it concurrently at the same time, get a purchase for own stay, get another one for rental investment. But if you are at a life stage that you don't want to feel very anxious doing so many things at one go, because sometimes moving your own home can be quite a stressful event. And while you need to navigate your professional work, your kids, childcare needs, relocation needs, movers and stuff like that, you also want to have time to renovate, get new furnitures and stuff, you can actually take a 1 year period if that is really not in a rush. So, but most importantly, the key fundamental kind of concept is that your primary property should not be a property that you time the market, because this is your primary property. If you were to time the market, you will go out to rent. Eventually, this main pivot home might create a situation where if we are in a bull run situation, you might be priced out very easily. So once this is settled, by the time just 1 year later, the valuation has increased to 1.3 million. And then what happened was that we helped them to purchase a new launch property with the ideation that once this property hits its TOP, we'll see how it's the performance. If the performance is good, we can help them to exit. If the performance is not really significant in terms of valuation appreciation at the TOP stage, we call this the herd mentality effect, then we can just rent it out until the valuation picks up. So fast forward to today, basically what happened is that at this stage, this is the current year 2023. And of course from here all the way to this stage, this is over a cross period of about 5 years. So basically, they started off with a valuation of their portfolio at 850,000. 1 year later, we moved them to a portfolio valuation of 1.2 million. And then when they're age 34, that's when they start to own 2 assets. Now, take note that this is a new launch. It's under progressive payment scheme. And is under construction. And of course, at age 37, what happened was that this property has then TOP'd, and the valuation has increased to $1.65 million. And they were thinking, hey, should they rent out or should they sell? And the final decision is that they decided to put it up for sale. So currently, we are putting up this property for sale for them. And it's not sold because we just listed it. But at this age, at age 37, basically what happened was that in the 5 years period, if they didn't take action, this property right now, I haven't checked the latest valuation, but it could be in a valuation range of about $1 million. But their valuation, total portfolio in terms of keeping this first property until today, if they didn't take any action, it would have just been $1 million. But now, in terms of total portfolio valuation, it has already increased to $3.25 million. So even if, let's say, they don't sell this property, because it's just TOP, they just rent it out, and they continue to live in this resale property that has appreciated to 1.6 million. And let's say, just for example, these two property stagnates for the next 25 years. And let's say by age 65, which is, I add on another 28 years from here. By age 65, both properties are fully paid. What's going to happen is that even if their portfolio valuation remains the same, it is still an expansion of portfolio valuation, because at age 65, when you sell both properties, technically you extract everything out at $3.25 million. Because you're 65, CPF you can already withdraw in full. And with that $3.25 million, you can then plan for your next stage. If you want to pay off one property at about $1 million or $2 million, you can still keep the balance $1 million in cash. And thus, their key mentality is that with dual income earning power, how can they take advantage of the current stage that they have higher earning power, and then they can expand their portfolio in a shorter period of time. So what is their methodology? Similarly, profit cycle, but this family, they prefer to own 2 condominiums, and they are in the expansion mode. And of course, if we were to just come back and look at this, as what we mentioned, even if at any point, if the property stagnates in value, but you just continue to live in it and enjoy it, and at the tail end, when you have already fully paid off, this entire amount, because of your forced savings into the principal over the years, and you definitely have to pay interest because you leverage from the bank, you can just treat the interest payment as your cost of living. And if the property don't appreciate, you can still exit. However, what happened was that because you took effort to expand your portfolio, you enjoy the fruits at the end. And if it were to appreciate, you can treat it as a bonus. So key mindset review here is that this family believe in expanding their portfolio while their income is still strong. And if they are comfortable with their own state property, they will not sell. They will continue to use the profit cycle framework and then rinse and repeat, provided the investment property performs well. And with that, let me pass on to George for case study number 8. Thank you.
All right, so I think till now we have been talking about clients or homeowners that are probably in their age of 30-odd to 40-odd. We are going into the golden years, and this is actually a retiree couple. They have actually been working hard for the past 30 over years. Right now, they are in their 60s. Over the years, they have done a couple of investments, currently own a 2-bedder CCR. Of course, they have their own place to stay. Have additional funds of about $2 million, no more debt. The current property has already been fully paid for. So they actually approached us on the advice on what to do next. For this current property, they purchased about 10 years back. That is in the CCR area. Purchased at about $1.452 million, 2,100 odd PSF back in 2012. The last valuation check is about 1.48 back in 2022. So at that stage, they are collecting a rental about $3,008. So this is fully coming into the pocket because there's no more other outstanding loan. Of course, you have to set aside for the other fees, miscellaneous fees, as well as any fair wear and tear that you might potentially have to put back into the property itself. Rental yield is hovering at about 3.3%. It has actually plateaued over the past 10 years. So they are kind of thinking, hey, should I be putting the $2 million into probably a funds generating at about 4% per annum? That will give you about $80,000 annually. As well as if let's say you want to kind of put into a rental, perhaps maybe set aside about 2 months ballpark as your expenses, and then nets off at about $38,000. Annually, we are looking at about $118,000 on an annual basis. So this is, of course, if let's say they stay put, because they have actually paid off everything, so they are not in a rush to say, I want to sell and then buy into something, especially when they're in their 60s and then they kind of want to use the funds and go on a monthly travel. What we kind of do next is we actually recommend for them to restructure their portfolio. At this stage, when we do that, they kind of want to cut loss. Especially from an investment point of view, they want to see how they can potentially utilize their dollars to make them work harder for them. So in 2023, we buy into a new launch, bringing them to an area that they are not familiar with, because all this while they have been investing in a CCR area. This time around, we bring them to a growth area and the OCR area. Purchase at about 1,900 odd PSF, that's still quite attractive at $1.88 million. This is a 3-beta. Right now, if we take a look at the surrounding average transacted PSF, they're actually sitting on a paper gain of about $156,000. So, of course, they have the name as well as the additional $2 million. What can they do next? They can buy into a resale. This doesn't have to be something that is brand new. They can still buy into something that is, of course, of a healthy balance list. $1.6 million, 3-beta, potential rental yield is about 3.75%. Last check, rental transacted have actually hit about $5,200. $5,000 is actually conservative. What we're going to do next is we want to kind of compare if they were to buy into a private property or if they were to put the $2 million into a funds, how would it fare? Fast forward, if let's say we were to do a projection, if let's say assuming taking into account of the construction as well as to take a bit of time to market the property and to sell, exiting in 2027, assuming at a price of 2,400 PSF, I would say 2004 is conservative in 2027. Especially right now, we're already seeing a new launch PSF transacting at about $2,500 odd dollars. That will potentially sell at about $2.32 million, less of the buyer's stamp duty that you actually accounted for here, as well as other miscellaneous fees, your legal fees, as well as the professional fees that are incurred in terms of the sale. Nets about $332,000. This is if let's say you want to sell. Of course, at that stage, if let's say the property is performing very well and you're in a bull run, you can then say that, okay, if let's say I want to kind of put the money back into my investment, I am very well versed in terms of my investment portfolio. What you can then do is you can extract equity, you can put the property into the rental market and then use the equity to kind of reinvest. The next property that you have, you can perpetually just put it up for rental because it's in a good area, you can fetch very good rental. Assuming 2 months of rental expenses, you can potentially get about $50,000 per annum. All in, if you take a look at, let's say, after the 4 years mark, of course, 3 years mark, you can start to sell after the SSD. 4 years mark, that will give you about $532,000 per annum, is about $133,000. So collectively, if you were to take a look at all these figures, naturally, of course, if let's say, if you think that you can beat 4%, if you can achieve 5, 6, 7%, of course, those are doable. There are actually funds in the market that can potentially give you, say, about 7 or 8%. Of course, if let's say you have the ability to do so, then maybe you might want to say, okay, I want to put the $2 million. I don't want to go through the hassle. Stay put in my current property. I'm happy to collect the rental. That is absolutely fine. For this context, it's about $118,000. On the other hand, if let's say you were to take action and then to buy into or to restructure your portfolio, especially when you're at a golden age, what you can totally net off after we annualize, we are talking about per annum at $133,000. Some of the caveat is that if let's say they want to kind of enter into this stage, they might want to say that, okay, I want to diversify my portfolio, I want to cut loss, which is actually one of the things that's for our clients they decided to do. The next thing is diversify into other growth areas, other areas that potentially can give you a higher growth returns. Of course, we are happy to help you to analyze further into that. Property is definitely a hard asset. So this property, if let's say it's performing well, what you can potentially do is you can easily extract the equity. Of course, when you extract equity, the other assessment by the banks will also come into play. So you might want to check on the assessment as well as the eligibility first before you go into the equity extraction. If you can qualify to do that, then of course the equity that you extract out, you can put back into the equities market and then to go into your own investment. Yeah. If that's, I'll pass on the mic to Yu Rong.
Sorry. Thank you, Josh. all in all, most of the time when we are nearing our retirement options, like sometimes we want to take lesser risks at a wealth preservation stage. A lot of times our clients also ask us, can we actually consider to actually repurpose some of the funds right, that are actually in higher and more volatile asset classes like equities, right? Position some of them to come to the stock market. So I always share the clients very quickly. Today I don't have the chart, but most of the time I say in 2020, during that COVID drop, we see that US stock market averagely dropped by 30% when COVID happened to the lowest point from the start of the year. Crypto also went down by about 30%, but Singapore property prices in general did not come down at all, except for core central region. It came down by negative 1.2% as an overall price that index in the market. In 2021, there was a bull run, all asset classes went up. In 2022, due to the quantitative tightening cycle where interest rate rises, we are reducing the money supply in the US market. We also see that US S&P 500 US stock market actually went down by about 16%. Crypto went down by another about 60%, while Singapore property prices overall continue to climb. So if that's the reason why there are more people considering, okay, now I have already made my pot of gold in other higher volatile investment. Now I want to play it safer, but not too safe such that I put a fixed deposit. My value could be eroded by inflation further because I probably have another 30, 40 years of retirement years to go. I want to make sure I want to put in a more balanced kind of structure. And that's why when good properties can come in handy to help you protect that wealth, still keep pace with inflation, outbeat them, so that in your retirement and golden years, you can continue to enjoy the income that can generate without a lot of headache or thinking that every 2 to 3 months you might need to reanalyze your stock portfolio because of volatility. You need to decide whether I should exit this stock, should I need to reposition the funds or not. Okay, coming up to the last case study. This is going to be a longer case study. Reason is because in 5 years' time, this family, before they met me, their portfolio size is, property portfolio size is about 1.58 million. Let's put it at 1.6 million in short. And actually, in 5 years' time, their portfolio flipped, become 6.1. So this is not an error, 1.6 to 6.1. And this is a very interesting case study because when the husband and wife met me, they came to see one of the houses that I was selling. I was selling a freehold, 3-bedder penthouse. And they were looking for freehold properties because at that point of time, they are thinking of legacy planning. They want to own a freehold property such that in the future, they can pass down to their kids. So in 2018, husband, wife, 48, 46 years old, they have 2 kids. 1 son, 1 daughter. At the moment of their portfolio, at that point of time, they own 2 properties. One, own stay, EC, in the western side, 3-bedder. That was worth about 860K, owned under both names. They also have an investment property, a condo that is 1-bedder, also on the west side. Valuation about 720K, also under both names. You realize that before 2013, most of the time when we acquire more properties, it's actually very easy. We just buy when we have enough funds. But because of the cooling measures or additional buyer stamp duty, nowadays strategizing is very important because if we don't strategize carefully, basically we are paying additional buyer stamp duty, 20% if you are Singaporean buying our second property. And these are actually money that is eroding your potential returns. And so what happened is that portfolio size was $1.58 million. And they're thinking, I want to invest to expand the portfolio. And it's mainly for legacy plan. I want to make sure that my son and daughter will be well taken care of, past my retirement years. So these are their portfolio. And just want to go back a little bit. Something interesting about that investment condo. That was in 2018 when we met. 720K is the property value. When did they buy this portfolio? They bought this investment condo actually in 2011. For 7 years, they've been holding on to this property. And interestingly, they bought it at 720K. So imagine you buy in 2011. It was a new launch. 7 years later, it was still worth the same price. So one thing to take away from this is not all new launches definitely will give you appreciation. You still need to know how to get into the correct project. And I always share with my clients that a good project does not make it a good investment. A lot of people know how to select a good project based on location attributes, near MRT, near good school, prime district, freehold property. However, they are not able to identify what is the disparity in terms of pricing And thereby we can give a little bit of forecast on how some properties pricing will move, and we position our funds earlier before the rest of our market is able to pick that up. And by going in earlier, waiting in the correct property, we are able to let go and exit to the next audience who are finding that good property. So there's a big difference, good property versus good investment. Next thing will be advice when I analyze somebody's portfolio is, I want to conclude to see whether we should sell or we should hold this property. If this property has got more potential, definitely we can continue to hold it. And so of course, we know that if you hold on to the property for 7 years and it doesn't appreciate, I have met many such property owners before, we always hope that our property price will go up. I also want the property prices to go up. But usually if you have held on to a property for more than 5 years and the pricing is still stagnant, it is probably quite unlikely that if you hold it for another 5 years, it's going to have a significant appreciation. So now you're in a juncture where you can decide 5 years or 7 years, it has not been performed. It could mean that even if you did not have any appreciation, you might be better off repurposing the funds and the equity that is inside this property and now change it to another property that's going to work harder for you. So of course the conclusion, this is very easy, sell. And rationale is, the other thing is you realize that they buy a Western side investment because it's very common for new investors. You always invest in a location that you are familiar with. Either that is where you are staying or because of where you grew up in. Because I just want to buy something that I'm familiar. Do not buy where you are familiar with. Buy where there is potential and there's going to be transformation and there's a disparity. Because a good project is not a good investment. Not necessarily means a good investment, because sometimes a good project can be a good investment. And so the other property that I stay in, of course, West Side. This original property that I stay in is 21 years old already. The good thing is the buying price was 540K. In 2018, it was worth 860K. So we have a good appreciation, about 320K, since they bought it 21 years ago. And so the conclusion was my conclusion was sell both. One is too old, one did not perform. However, after further understanding, they actually have an emotional reason and a personal reason that at that stage, at that point in time, they cannot let go of that own stay property, this EC. So we decided, okay, we will have to sell this first, and then we will decouple the other one. And we need to make sure that we sell the investment condo first before we decouple. So one of the things is decoupling only works if you have only one property under a husband and wife name. If you own more than one property, both under husband and wife name, there is no way that you can decouple and actually save ABSD, because when you decouple the first property, essentially it's not a simple transfer of husband to wife. Basically, one spouse buys over the other person's share. That is a transaction itself. You already need to pay a buyer's stamp duty, and if that spouse that is buying already own one property, that will be his second property and he will be paying additional buyer's stamp duty even while you're doing decoupling. Hence, we have to sell the first one first at the same pricing that they bought, no choice, because that's how the market is at a point of time. And after selling, we decouple to have the husband retain this own stay property. Okay. The other thing will also be, you might be thinking, how come they are so they find it comfortable to let go of the property that did not profit? Because usually it's easier to make a decision on your investment property because there are no emotions in it. You're not staying inside. You can see that the own stay property, there is emotional reason why they cannot sell, but investment property usually don't have unless it is already in the red. So of course, these owners who are already having 20% down, of course they won't sell. But if you are in same pricing or like a minor loss, it is very likely that with the right understanding of opportunity cost, you will want to switch your portfolio. And not to forget that they actually collected 4 years of rental. So even though that property did not perform, they actually did have some rental income along the way for the last 4 years. Okay. And so that after we sell and decouple, the advice was, I understand that long-term wise, they would like to have legacy planning, one freehold property for one son and the other daughter. And I said, actually, you are still quite young. We have still one more profit cycle to go. Actually, we can just go full on up for investment. In 5 years' time, we will restructure this investment and then end up in the freehold property. Because I mentioned that freehold properties usually tend not to perform as fast as a good 99-year leasehold property in a similar location. But of course, after many rounds of back and forth discussion, they were still very adamant that, okay, I want to go for a freehold property. So of course, no problem. We went for a freehold property, and so this is how we structured it. Because we have decoupled, we used the wife name to go into an investment property. This is a condo, 3-bedder in the city fringe location, walking distance to MRT station. Freehold, most important. $2 million. And most of the time, I also advise that maybe we try not to, consider projects that are too small in sizing, maybe less than 100 units. But most of the time, freehold properties tend to be in that kind of sizing. But the good thing is, this project is slightly above 100 units. We find the biggest land size project in a freehold locale where there are a lot of small projects. So that allows us to have some unique characteristics when we want to exit, because if you're in this location and you want to have a big land size, there are only 3 projects in that region that fulfill that criteria. So that allows me to exit. But if I'm going on a smaller project, I might need to compete with another 30 projects. So the other thing was, because they also have additional funds and they say, okay, since we need to keep their own state property, so maybe how can we reuse these funds without paying ABSD? And that's where I suggested a trust structure. So trust structure previously was basically, number one, we are buying in trust for the daughter. And when we buy in trust, what it means is that this investment no longer belongs to the parents anymore. This is now already belonging to the daughter. The daughter will be the eventual beneficiary. Today, I buy under trust for my daughter. Now I am just like a caretaker. I'm managing these funds for my daughter. From day one when I set up this trust, it belongs to the daughter. So it is, of course, we don't have to pay additional buyer's stamp duty in that context. But the reason why I do it is because eventually we are doing a legacy planning for their children, and we don't have to wait for the parents to pass on, move to heaven, to actually start to plan for their children. We can just buy in trust immediately for them. Right? So that's why we decided on a trust structure, because a lot of times people understand the trust structure wrongly. They think that it is still their money. It is not. First thing. Second thing is, a lot of times they think of it as an ABSD avoidance mechanism. It is not. It is just a pre-planning for your children's portfolio. And thirdly, recently, because of the adjustment of a trust structure ABSD, nowadays you want to buy under trust, you have to come up with 65% additional buyer's stamp duty. After fulfilling 3 criteria, you are able to refund back this 65% additional buyer's stamp duty. So if you are still exploring trust structure, make sure that you work with a property consultant that is very well-versed in this area. Also work with lawyers that are very well-versed and confident in knowing what are the 3 conditions that you need to meet in order to have the ABSD refund for you. Because 65% is a lot of money. So total property portfolio value in 2018, before we met 1.56 million, after we made this adjustment, we sold one, replaced it with 2 other condos. Now the total portfolio size is actually 3.56 million. Fast forward, 2021, 3 years later. Now, they are ready that they can let go of their own state property. And their own state property, initially in 2018, was worth 860,000. In 2021, it was worth 880,000. So you can see that when you hold on to a leasehold property that is too old, and that area do not have new transformation elements to push up the pricing, you realize that 3 years, the appreciation is about 20,000. We are not saying that resale properties do not appreciate. We just need to understand that as property price index will go up, we need to understand that one property cannot keep going up in pricing. It might only have one spurt of price increase, that's it. For properties that could have multiple spurts of price increase in their entire property cycle, usually it needs additional external trigger impact. So usually that is because of transformation. Maybe MRT line comes up. Maybe a new mall comes up. Maybe if you are holding it long enough, this entire landscape change and we have a new workforce, work industry over here, another 100,000 more jobs created. That could be one factor that actually push up pricing. It could be a new launch that came up recently that is at record pricing and hence uplift this resale price. So we need this kind of external trigger factors. Moving on, number one is to understand that When the property reaches a certain stage, there's no foreseeable transformation, it will stay stagnant. It might be better to switch earlier, but of course, we have our own personal reasons. So in 2021, we switched to another freehold. This is freehold. No, this is only under husband name. Supposed to be a freehold. It's a freehold property. I did not write it down over here. However, they chose to stay on their own, near MRT as well, $2.5 million in 2021. Right now, in 2023, this $2.5 million property for own stay has appreciated. In 2 years' time, another 500K, so now it's worth $3 million. The initial freehold investment, $2.3 million, they bought in at $2 million. And the other one bidder that is in trust is also a freehold property we bought at 700K. Now it's at about 800,000. So just remember that there are a few key things. Now the portfolio size is $6.1 million. But the good thing is that this client did not make the best decision in every single juncture. This client did not make the most optimized decision in every single juncture because number one, when I say investment property, we don't need to buy freehold, right? We decide to buy freehold. And we chose the best freehold out of that selection process, and hence it did not give them the best return that they can get over that same period. However, they still serve to have their property portfolio expand in a very comfortable region. So what it means is that a lot of times when a lot of clients come to our consult, they have a lot of fear, definitely, because this is a big jump, a big leap of faith, getting into more loans. But this is, of course, like good debt. But we want to know is, we also do not need to get into the most optimized decision or the best decision because they come to us because they love our research. We give a lot of data, a lot of study, and I understand what is the best opportunity. Most of the time, the data helps us to understand more clearly where are the opportunities. Of course, no opportunities are 100% guaranteed, but as long as we take an action where we have covered our risk, and so as long as we cover our risk and we make sure that the risk to reward is asymmetrical, there are more rewards compared to the risk that we are taking, the time and the portfolio will take care of itself for you. So we don't need to get everything right. So in summary, freehold properties usually do not perform as well as a good leasehold property in a short time frame. Of course, long-term time frame, 15, 20 years, freehold properties are better at wealth preservation and longer-term appreciation. You don't need to buy a freehold property if you're still in the property expansion cycle. It will be more applicable if you're in the retirement phase, you're in the legacy planning phase, you want to readjust that portfolio for wealth preservation. And so this is the story of how my client managed to convert a 1.5 million portfolio in 2018. In 5 years' time, it became $6.1 million. Okay. And so I will pass on to Melvin.
And because you have stayed with us till the end, I promise you a free research tool that we're going to release very, very soon. And this has something to do with our PLB own in-house research tool called the PLB moat analysis. So very quickly, what's going to happen is that in about 1 to 2 weeks' time, we're going to release our PLB moat recommended projects report. And this is Q4 2023. What we have done is that our research team has crafted about 100 over-page report across 6 different MRT lines, and we studied the radius of 500 meters of each MRT station in Singapore, trying to sift out the moat scoring of the projects within that 500 meters radius. So this is going to help you with these 3 aspects because we're going to study all the projects near MRT stations. There's also profit analysis of each MRT station. There's also profit analysis of each project within the 500 meters radius. So of course, our moat analysis is based on 10 different factors, and it will be explained thoroughly within the report itself. So what is going to happen is that we're going to release a free segment within this 100-page report. The East-West line report is estimated to be about 13 to 15 pages. And what you're going to see is that within each report, there's a MRT profit analysis. But I think what will most interest you is technically this final moat score, the number of transactions over the last 6 months. And we aim to release a full deck every quarter moving on using our moat analysis. And you're going to see the distance from MRT, the tenure based on the lease, whether is it freehold 99 years, the average PSF minimum, maximum distance from MRT, of course, the specific project name. Now, this is going to help you to make an informed decision if, let's say, you are into numbers, you want to analyze, you want to look at the mode scoring of different projects, performance across a 6 months period. And we will be releasing this on our Telegram channel soon. So we're going to pin it at the top of our Telegram channel. So if you're not subscribed to our Telegram channel, do take the time to scan on the QR code. We're going to leave it right here for a little while, as well as sending the Telegram link into the chat box for you to subscribe to our Telegram channel. So once it's going to release in about 1 to 2 weeks' time, we're going to pin it at the top of the channel. Do keep a lookout. Just click on the link, key your name and email. You'll be able to download the report for free. And what you have experience with us today over the 9 different case studies. Of course, it's been close to about 2 hours. Thank you for staying tuned with us, and we hope that we have added value to you, as well as sharing with you our insights on the ground over the years. And of course, this is a combination effort from our research team, our media team, as well as our inside sales team at PLB Realty, as well as PLB Media. We have technically touched on property expansion model, home owner's journey strategy model, as well as the HDB plus condo strategy. There's still various models that we have not touched on. Do remember to sign up for our regular webinars. So once again, I want to thank you for joining us on this 2 hours webinar. And this is live from our PLB studio. And yes, we did it, if you stayed till the end. And thank you for joining myself. My name is Melvin Lim. And of course, George and Yu Rong. We hope to see you on the next couple of webinars. And meantime, do take care and have a good weekend ahead. Cheers.